Pythagoras of Samos, a first-class philosopher and mathematician, some say the first philosopher, lived around 2,600 years ago in ancient Greece. No written records by Pythagoras has ever been recovered. It is believed that Pythagoras was the consummate scholar, having a firm grasp of the classics at an early age. Some even believe that he was of deistic origins. We are told that Pythagoras was so knowledgeable and influential that he developed a
cult
school of followers known as the Pythagoreans. It is they who our account of Pythagoras' life is derived. You might have heard about his thoughts on triangles, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, for instance. Pythagoras believed that the orbits and movements of celestial bodies are governed by precise mathematical ratios, and these ratios correspond to musical intervals and harmonies. His followers would also go on to develop a system of tuning called Pythagorean tuning. This body of belief that universal concepts can be explained using simple whole number ratios would be named the music of the spheres. If Pythagoras could explain the musical relationships using simple whole number ratios, perhaps then he could tune into the perfect cosmic melody. Pythagoras is known for discovering ratios to specific intervals that follow the harmonic series, such as perfect intervals like the octave, fourth, and fifth. But the classification system used to describe intervals was an ongoing development in music history, in some cases spanning 2 millennia. Thus one would not be able to intuit that a 3-to-2 ratio is equivalent to the perfect fifth interval. So let's just establish some musical nomenclature first, just so everyone is reading from the same sheet music. The space between 2 notes in any kind of scale is called an interval. An interval can be the distance between 2 adjacent notes or 2 notes farther apart. Ancient Greeks after Pythagoras,
less ancient Greeks,
developed a 7-note musical scale known as the diatonic, or through-tone scale, roughly 1,000 years later, give or take 500 years.
Basically, the internet has no idea.
Basically. In a diatonic scale, 7 notes are used, determined by a formula of interval spacings.
Scales
Constructed in this manner have a distinct sonance, or tonal center, such as the C major scale shown here. There are 4 primary ways that intervals can be referenced or measured. First, scale degrees, next, quality and size, third, half step or semitone, fourth, cent. The first 2 rely on positions within the scale, and the second 2 rely on physical or tonal distance apart. Scale degrees can be utilized to reference ordinal relationships to the first note in the scale, called the tonic, or first degree. The 8th degree is often listed at the end of a diatonic scale, a mark of completion to the scale. Another reference method is by quality and size. For example, a major third interval is from the first degree to the third degree in a diatonic scale. A perfect fourth interval is from the first degree to the fourth degree. The perfect fifth is from the first degree to the fifth degree. And another kind of perfect interval, the octave, is from the first degree to the 8th degree.
Hence the name octave.
The next 2 methods of measuring intervals, the half step and the cent, differ based on what tuning system one is using. The tuning system that most modern instruments use today is called equal temperament. One of its breakthroughs in tuning standards was figuring out a mathematical way to calculate every step up in pitch as an equal interval.
That sounds completely irrational.
Half steps, or semitones, measure this equal interval distance in equal temperament. In harmonics, or 2 notes that represent the same pitch, are in fact equal in pitch and are the same half-step interval in equal temperament. Alas, Pythagorean tuning does not have this luxury. Pythagoras and his followers were really big into numbers that could be derived from simple whole number ratios.
That sounds a lot more rational to me.
Consequently, their step-ups in pitch have different values for each inharmonic pair. In Pythagorean tuning, a natural to a flat is called a diatonic half-step and is flatter than an equal temperament half-step. And a natural to a sharp is called the Pythagorean apodomy and is sharper than an equal temperament half-step. Finally, the last step at the end needs to be
Fudged?
tempered down to fit inside the indisputable pure tone octave ratio of 2:1. Now, the 4th and last method to measure an interval will require a bit of sense.
You think our viewers should give us a like if they're resonating with our frequency?
Oh, that would be wonderful. I was actually talking about the next unit of measure, though, the cent.
Oh, that makes sense.
In music, a cent is a logarithmic unit used to measure the difference in pitch between 2 notes. Fortunately for us, though, sense can bolster the descriptions of half steps, diatonic semitones, Pythagorean apotomies, and Pythagorean commas, so I don't have to make a new chart for scratch. An equal temperament half step is equal to 100 cents, the diatonic half step is equal to 90 cents, the Pythagorean apotomy is approximately 113 cents,
and the Pythagorean comma results when the 12th interval in the scale
that should equal a tonic actually overshoots it, representing a 23-cent discrepancy, or when enharmonics don't quite line up. More on this later. An interval's measure of sense is directly related to its level of sonance. Intervals can sound consonant or producing a harmonious tone, such as in a Pythagorean perfect fifth interval, an equally tempered octave, or Pythagorean perfect fourth. They can also sound dissonant, producing a tense or uneasy tone, such as in a tritone interval, a Wolf fifth, or Pythagorean octave with the comma included. Dissonance between intervals can be deliberate, as is the case with the tritone, or it can be embarrassingly accidental, such as when Pythagoras' math doesn't work out as he hoped. A couple cents is not very noticeable to the human ear. The Pythagorean perfect fifth at 702 cents and the equally tempered perfect fifth at 700 cents will sound the same to 99.9% of the population. A really trained ear might be able to detect a 5 to 10 cents difference in an interval. However, most of us can pick out a 23.5 cent difference between two pitches, such as with the Pythagorean comma.
Banjo Dan, can we hear what some of these intervals sound like without using sophisticated music software?
Certainly. This is a 5-string equally tempered banjo, which is the instrument of choice on my channel. I have a cent machine right here to dial into Pythagorean tuning as well. This is the C3 to C4 Pythagorean octave at 1200 cents, which is the same as the C3 to C4 equal temperament octave at 1200 cents. Now if I take C4 up a couple bars on my sense machine, it should approximately equal the cent difference of the Pythagorean comma. So if I play C3 with the C4 being approximately 23.5 cents sharp, it'll sound like this. And then the C3 to G3 Pythagorean perfect fifth interval at 702 cents, which I'll slightly tweak this string right here.
Not quite perfect, but pretty close.
And then the equal temperament perfect fifth at 700 cents. Could you tell the difference? A Pythagorean perfect fourth interval at C4 to F4, measuring 498 cents. And here's an example of a Pythagorean Wolf fifth,
in which the interval is between the Pythagorean apotomy and the diatonic semitone,
which is a 678 cent interval. Pythagoras and his
Cronies?
acolytes were big into simple whole numbers such as 1, 2, and 3. So much so that they believed that the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything could be explained numerologically. So it may not be surprising to hear that Pythagoras figured out a mathematical relationship between a taut string and a point at half its scale length using a simple whole number ratio, producing an extremely consonant sound that basically sounded like the same note being played. A perfect interval, if you will. In pursuit of Pythagoras' perfect cosmic melody, he continued his research. He knew that a melody couldn't be constructed by stacking only octaves on top of one another. Our ears basically hear the same perfectly consonant sound after all, no matter the pitch. But what if he converted his octave ratio of 2 to 1 to a fraction, 2 over 1, and added 1 to both the numerator and the denominator? Thus he discovered another extremely consonant sound past the octave, but with enough ambition to be distinctly different from the octave, which we now call the perfect fifth interval. Furthermore, unlike with the octaves, stacking these perfect fifths or 3 to 2 ratios one after another seem to produce more really consonant tones with different pitches. Pythagoras likely tried adding 1 to other intervals, but they may not have sounded as perfect to his ears as was required, except for maybe the perfect fourth interval at 4 to 3. It's important to note that Pythagoras wasn't trying to develop a musical scale in a non-cosmic sense, but his work with intervals eventually led to the discovery of Pythagorean tuning. Understanding the pros and cons of Pythagorean tuning will be easier if we went ahead and constructed a scale based on Pythagoras' findings of pure tone 3:2 musical ratios. We can start anywhere, but the role of the octave plays an important part, so C will be the easiest fundamental note to work with. The process will involve 1. Identify scale notes by making perfect fifth interval jumps away from the fundamental and across octaves. 2. Convert enharmonics to the best note equivalent as needed. 3. Calculate the scaled ratios, a multi-step process of its own. 4. Select the simplest ratios where possible, more on this later. And 5. Rescaling values back to the home octave. First, we need to identify the notes for the scale. We can start by making perfect fifth jumps in one direction away from our fundamental C at octave reference 0. I'll color in C as bright green to keep it distinct from our notes derived from perfect fifth jumps. I'm unsure how many stacks, or jumps, we'll need to make to complete the scale, so let's just go until something weird happens. C to G is our first perfect fifth jump and stays in the home octave of 0. G to D is our second jump, which requires going up to octave 1. D to A stays in octave 1. A to E jumps to octave 2, and E to B stays in octave 2. B to F sharp jumps to octave 3, F sharp to C sharp jumps to octave 4, C sharp to G sharp holds octave 4. G sharp to D sharp jumps to octave 5, and D sharp to A sharp stays in octave 5. A sharp to E sharp jumps to octave 6. Now E sharp is the enharmonic equivalent to F, and we haven't jumped to an F yet, so we'll convert this note to F when the time comes and keep going. E sharp to B sharp jumps to octave 7, and B sharp to F sharp sharp stays in octave 7.
Banjo Dan, I think we hit the weird factor.
Agreed. On to step 2, converting enharmonics. We've successfully circled back to our starting pitch of C with the enharmonic B sharp. We'll use the calculations for B sharp in our scale in place of C since it is a note derived from a perfect fifth interval. But we'll hang on to the fundamental C to serve as a reference point anyway. Let's also convert E sharp to F. Lastly, let's discard F sharp sharp since we already have a G. Since it appears that the scale is starting to repeat itself, let's total up the notes. 12 tones, just like the chromatic scale.
Coincidence?
And 7 octaves, just like the piano.
Another coincidence?
On to step 3, calculating the ratios. Our fundamental, or baseline C, can be listed as a 1-to-1 ratio, and every other perfect fifth located can be represented as a 3-to-2 ratio. They can also be represented as fractions of 3 over 2. If we want to know how every ratio relates to the fundamental at 1 over 1, each subsequent ratio after G needs to be multiplied by 3 over 2 in turn, representing a scaled ratio from the fundamental. They can also be taken to the next power from a fundamental 3 over 2 to the 0th power, which of course equals 1. The G to D stack becomes 3 over 2 to the first power. The D to A stack becomes 3 over 2 to the second power, and so on. Step 4 we need to hold off on for now, more on this step later. These fractions represent the scaled or multiplied ratios of the notes in our scale at every respective octave range they're in. But now we need to rescale them back to the home octave, which is our final step. Since frequencies double at every step up an octave, the baseline C at a 1-to-1 ratio will double its numerator value at every new octave. To rescale the perfect fifth ratios back to the home octave, we need to divide by the octave scale or multiply by 1 over the octave scale, which gives us some pretty impressive ratios, all things considered. Now we can calculate coefficient values, so we can compare apples to apples, and bring them up and over. What we've built is a full 12-tone scale by essentially going clockwise around the circle of fifths. Now let's see here, things are looking pretty good.
Banjo Dan, what's going on at the fundamental C?
Ow!
Yes, we have one ratio sticking out like a sore thumb. The enharmonic B sharp should equal 1.000 like the fundamental C we began with, but it equals 1.014 instead.
I strike! This number is mine.
I'm sorry?
You shan't have this number.
We actually don't want it. We just want our math to equal.
Impossible. I forbid it.
Ah, and herein lies the problem to pursuing a perfect cosmic melody by stacking perfect fifth intervals. The Pythagorean comma. A comma in music is a tiny interval between two pitches. At approximately a 1.014 coefficient value based on B sharp's rescaled ratio of 531,441 to 524,288, which does not equal the ratio at our fundamental pitch C at 1-to-1.
Yeah, but is a 1.014 value really that big a deal? I mean, who's going to notice it?
Recall our conversation earlier about measuring intervals by values of cents. An uncorrected Pythagorean octave totals 1,223 cents, though, or 23 cents sharp. And as we learned on the banjo, 23 cents, or a 1.014 coefficient surplus, is a noticeable difference. So with Pythagorean tuning, the earliest documented tuning system there is, the octave is tempered down to equal a 2-to-1 ratio. To put it in another perspective, a 23-cent offset is about a quarter step difference. This translates to a small but noticeable fissure between pitches, since even an untrained ear can gobble down a 25-cent difference. It seems like Pythagoras' experiment by going in one direction away from the fundamental has failed.
Wait, Banjo Dan, you said Pythagoras went in one direction. One. What if he went the other way away from C?
You mean if you use perfect fourth intervals leftward of the fundamental C?
Yes, exactly. Is there still hope?
I was actually just about to click the upload to YouTube button. You know what? Let's do the math anyways in the other direction.
Now we're talking. Whoever said music theory isn't exhilarating or fun?
You actually just mentioned that to me off screen just a few minutes ago. You said, quote, Banjo Dan, music theory is not fun or exhilarating, unquote.
Well, I meant after that.
Now we're going backwards or from right to left from our bass note, C, making perfect fourth stacks or jumps, and going down octave references and from the right to left for additional stacks, descending into negative octave references. Another perspective is that we're formulating the notes used by going counterclockwise on the circle of fifths, identifying the root notes to the flat keys used in the circle, and in the order that they appear in the circle. Viewing the jumps from left to right will appear as perfect fifth intervals, though. We can take out the skipped over notes. Again, we have 12 notes, and the scale starts to repeat itself past the analog enharmonic of C in the inverse 7th octave. In this chart, we can compare all the unconverted notes derived from the perfect fifth jumps with all the unconverted notes derived from the perfect fourth jumps. Both the 3-to-2 intervals and the 2-to-3 intervals urge us to construct a 12-tone scale, because beyond 12 tones, as we've discovered, the intervals begin repeating themselves. Thus, we must treat the enharmonics as equal in pitch to one another, since we don't have any more notes in Western music to work with. What do you notice about the fractions and coefficient values between methods?
Nothing is equal in pitch. Not a single Slytherin value matches up.
True, but at least they all don't match up equally.
Dividing each coefficient derived by a 3-to-2 interval by its 2-to-3 interval counterpart yields.
There's no such thing as a cosmic melody.
For the fundamentals and harmonics, B sharp's coefficient is already equal to the Pythagorean comma, but for form's sake, let's just divide it by the fundamental of 1.000, and we can divide 1.000 by D flat's coefficient of 0.987 to equal...
Silly Pythagoreans.
Yeah.
Well, no one said this tuning system would be perfect.
Actually, wasn't that exactly what Pythagoras was looking to do, to create the perfect cosmic melody?
All is not lost, my dear Watson. There is more work to be done. Recall that the human ear prefers sounds that are derived from simple whole number ratios, or ratios that are very close to being reducible. The larger and more complex the ratio becomes, the more dissonant it sounds to our ears. Dissonance literally translates to feelings of stress and anxiety within us. Consider the following intervals on the banjo. A 1-to-1 unison, a 2-to-1 octave, a 3-to-2 perfect fifth interval, a 4-to-3 perfect fourth interval, a 5-to-4 major third, a 6-to-5 minor third, a 7-to-5 tritone F to B, a 9-to-8 major second C to D, or a 16-to-15 ratio, which is a minor second, C to C sharp. So it may not be difficult to ascertain which column the more complex intervals produced from Pythagorean tuning should go into. Instead, we can choose the smallest ratios from both directions to construct a scale with the most harmonious
sounds.
For the inharmonics at C, which one would you choose, Frail and Danny?
Neither.
There is something disconcerting about them, to be sure. The Pythagoreans thought so too, so they chose the third option, tempering the inharmonics B sharp or D flat flat, to match the fundamental of 1.00 or its octave at 2.000.
Isn't that like cheating?
Tempering, Frail and Danny, tempering. Tempering the last interval avoids the sharpness from the 23.5 cent Pythagorean comma and ensures the scale fits tidily between the octaves. The concept of tempering will be used for the rest of music theory history, up to and including the present day's equal temperament. So, it's a thing.
Okay, got it. Math is more of a guideline than a hard and fast rule.
Now we have all available notes with the simplest ratios for the Pythagorean scale. The left-hand column contains the original note values, and the right-hand column shows their assumed note values.
Is it finally time to hear the perfect cosmic melody by playing the perfect fifths derived from Pythagorean tuning?
Yes, it is, Frail and Danny. Let's say a prayer first, though, just in case. Dear Lord, after all our hard work, please make these intervals sound perfect. C to G. D flat to A flat. D to A. E flat to B flat. E to B. F to C. And F sharp to D flat. Huh.
Does that interval kind of sound like a wolf?
Yes, here's our final pitfall to Pythagorean tuning, the wolf interval. One wolf interval occurs with every scale built with Pythagorean tuning.
What if we just chose the two other inharmonics to the perfect fifth interval, though?
Alas, it would be the same situation. Both types are off by...
Don't say it!
When will you ever learn?
Transposition is no better. No matter what note you use for the fundamental, there will always be exactly one perfect fifth wolf interval in the key. And it will occur between a sharp or flat root note and its opposite fifth degree counterpart, which produces a perfect fifth interval that howls like a wolf when played, sharp or flat by 23.5 cents. I'm sorry, Pythagoras, your perfect cosmic melody is still out of reach.
So why were people using Pythagorean tuning for centuries again?
Well, it was the only tuning system that made the most sense at the time. Despite its shortfalls, using pure tone perfect fifth intervals as a way to derive notes on a scale worked well in certain situations.
What situations?
If composers were okay sticking to just one key, then perfect fifth intervals sounded really divine. As long as that wolf interval was avoided, or major and minor intervals for that matter. But no one cared about such trivial matters at the time. If an interval didn't sound highly consonant, it was generally avoided.
Yeah, but wouldn't that get kind of boring after a while, musically speaking?
Probably. Others thought so too. Hence the formulation of other tuning systems like just intonation, mean tone temperament, and equal temperament. But they all struggle to tune intervals. Either one interval is spot on and another interval is 10 cents off, or vice versa. Thus, the bottom line in music theory history appears to be that compromises must be made. All intervals can't all be perfectly in tune. Either one needs to pick a few types of intervals to be pure and play the entire scale with reduced playability, or loosen the guidelines for the sake of increased playability across all intervals and all keys. Take this banjo here, for example. Equal temperament has made it into a very versatile key changer. Sure, it has problems with certain intervals, but all instruments in equal temperament have the same problem.
Which is pretty much all modern instruments nowadays.
And if all instruments have the same problem, then it's not really a problem, is it? Are all my non-unison, non-octave intervals perpetually slightly out of tune? Yes. Can my banjo play in different keys without overhauling my fretboard? Yes. Will all other instruments in equal temperament sound relatively in tune when playing together? Yes.
So it seems musical perfection is attainable by embracing imperfection?
Precisely.
I strike. I strike. I strike again.